Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in the prophecy of Daniel, and we're going to get into Daniel is one of the most fascinating books, and it combines it is broken up into really two sections, sort of the historical narrative, mostly of Daniel. And then uh, the latter half of the book interprets this dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, what we studied last time in the second chapter. Nebuchadnezzar was given a dream by God. Only Daniel could have interpreted. Why? Because God gave him the dream. God gave Nebuchadnezzar the dream. And all of his magicians, all of his wise men could not interpret the dream. They tried to, if you just tell us a dream, if you just tell us, we will interpret it. And Nebuchadnezzar was smart enough to know, if I tell you the dream, yeah, you're going to make up anything. Sort of like when you have these ministers and these people who claim to have gone to heaven or hell. I know one has nothing to do with the other. That's just my pot shot. But it's sort of the same principle, right? If I say I go to heaven, I can just make up anything I want. But I do digress. But Nebuchadnezzar said, look, if you cannot tell me the dream, then I know that you're just going to play me. So after they kept saying, what you're asking is impossible, then he said, well, fine, I'm going to kill all of you all. Then Daniel stepped up and said, hey, I'll not only tell you the dream, but I'm going to give you the interpretation. So that's what Daniel did. After praying and seeking God, he then went to the king and said, hey, here is your dream. In the dream, you saw a statue, a human form. It's tall, kind of filling the whole earth. And then the interpretation was even more profound because it is a prophetic picture, a prophetic timeline from Daniel's time or Nebuchadnezzar's day until the very end of the age or the end of the world. It is also signifying the end of man's time. So what we have here is I'm going to show another image of this picture here, the Nebuchadnezzar's dream. But it is, again, this was for what Daniel interpreted was the statue composed of five world dominating or five world ruling kingdoms. In other words, the distinctive with these kingdoms were that they rule the world. Now, you have always, of course, mighty kingdoms. Egypt, Assyria, they were mighty empires, but they did not rule the world. These kingdoms will rule the entire world, the entire face of the world. And then Daniel says something very important. For first, he says that the head of gold was Babylon, and then the second kingdom, the one of the breastplate of silver, was the Mede and Persian kingdom. Now, Daniel actually, he is going to live through these two kingdoms. The beginning of the Mede and Persian kingdom. The second one is thighs of brass. I don't know why I didn't show brass here, but anyway, it is the Grecian kingdom. And then the legs of iron is the Roman Empire, which brings us to the time of Jesus, of course, in the book of Acts. But it is this, the final kingdom, the feet of iron and clay, which we're going to later see is going to be 10 nations. And what I want to kind of show you, let me show you the other image here. This is the other image that during the time of this last kingdom, that the rock represents the kingdom of Jesus. Jesus coming, and it says it strikes the image at its feet, and that's kind of telling because of the timeline. It strikes at his feet, and then and during these days, it says Jesus will set up a kingdom that will never end. All right. Um, so a very fascinating book. This is a again, it gives us a very when we get to chapter 6, basically it's going to interpret this in detail, further detail, this prophetic vision here, this image. All right, so let's go. As I said, the first as we get into chapter 3, Daniel at the beginning of chapter 3, we're going to get a little more narrative. Daniel's rise. You can say his rise as a prophet, his rise in his position. Now, I'm going to kind of, at the end, when Daniel tells the dream, I'm going to backtrack for a minute because in the 3rd chapter, it's very telling. So remember, he tells the dream. You saw the image there. He tells the dream. So this is now Nebuchadnezzar's response. Excuse me, verse 46. Now this is chapter 2, verse 46 says, Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell down and paid homage to Daniel and gave orders to present an offering and incense to him. And the king said to Daniel, Your God is indeed God of gods and Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, since you were able to reveal this mystery. And the king promoted Daniel and gave him many generous gifts and made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief governor over all of the wise men of Babylon. Now, we're going to see, as I said, that this you're going to see later where the wise men were not happy with this. They should have been, since God used Daniel literally to save their lives. In other words, that if Daniel had not interpreted the dream, all of them would have been killed. But we're going to see later on, and from this perspective, many years on, you're going to see they're going to hate Daniel. And what's going to be interesting is that you're going to see that they have been nursing this for years and years and years. So we're going to get to this later in chapter 6, but I mean chapter 5. But verse 9 says, and at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, the late Carlton Pearson said many years ago, Shadrach, Meshach, and a bad Negro. Okay, it says to manage the province of Babylon, but Daniel remained at the king's court. So Daniel was kind of like number 2 under the king, proving himself to be a wise man. Now, remember, if you go back in chapter 1, Daniel was, he proved to be wise, not just a revealer of dreams, but also just in terms of in wisdom. So now, remember this here, that the king Nebuchadnezzar, he fell down and paid homage to Daniel. This looks like it's a praise, doesn't it? Now, there's a couple of things I think is worth noting about this. That when he says, your God is indeed God of God and Lords of Lord and a revealer of mysteries, since you were able to reveal this mystery. Now, a couple of things. One, this kind of tells you that these mystery people who claim to be, can see into the mystic, right? That's the word I'm looking for, is fake. People cannot read your minds. There are people that, if you think about a lot of psychics, right? Mind readers, they can't. What they do is study. Like, for example, you look at all of the people that claim to prophesy, and unfortunately, this even happens in the church. You go to some of these so-called prophetic ministries and all that, where they pretend to be able to read minds, or they'll say, the Lord told me this. You got troubles on your mind, daughter, right? Well, sometimes the way they do that is guess, okay? And how they guess is they kind of read your face. Look at your body language, right? So if you're preaching and then you scan the audience, now I'm not even talking about, I'm not going to get into the ultimate fakes. There's a guy that he is still on TV, and I don't want to probably get his name. I might get in trouble with YouTube, but I'm being like coded here, but popcorn, okay, Peter Popcorn, all right. And he comes on late night, and he was caught many years ago, pretending that God as he was scanning the audience, and he would pick somebody out, and he would tell them this story, reveal this story to them, and people thought, "Oh man, this God he's a prophet. He's got the mind of God." What was discovered was the scam was they would size people up as they were coming in. So, for example, a lot of and other fake healers do this too. If a person is sort of limping in, right, they would go like, hey, dear sister, take a load off. They would sit them in a wheelchair. Might kind of size them up, get a little information from them, and they would wheel them in. And that's when these healing evangelists would say, hey, yeah, heal, right? And they would stand them up and walk. People would think, oh my God, they got up and they walked. But the problem is that they were limping in the first place. They were walking slow in the first place. And of course, you never see the follow-up. Well, in Peter Popcorn's case, they would talk to people outside, get information from them. Then they would go to a trailer that's outside that was wired in. You can see the television wired in. And then Peter Popcorn, he would have this earphone in his ear, and they would tell him, that sister right there, call her out. And they would reveal stuff with her. Well, that's what the king here was telling about his wise men. That if you cannot tell me what I dream, now he could have. I mean, I'm kind of older, and I can say sometimes I can forget something, but I'll know it when I hear it. In other words, in my mind, because my aged mind, I could say, well, man, what was it that I was thinking about? But once I hear it, yes, that's it. Now, here's the thing. Absolutely no one can read minds. The devil cannot read your mind. He cannot read your mind. Okay? But like I say, people could code read, they called it. They could look at your expression. If you do not express it, if you just sit there like this, right, expressionless, they're not going to even attempt to try to get you to say anything, because they're smart enough to know, okay, I can't read. But if I'm preaching and then I look and there's someone who's sad, then I can address that. If someone is really into my sermon, watching me, right, hey man, then I can address it that way. It's a scam. Yes, it's a scam, but they cannot read minds. So only a true prophet could read the minds as God reveals. In other words, a true prophet cannot just read minds. By the way, no one has a gift to just read minds. They would only read minds as God revealed it to them. And in this case, God gave Nebuchadnezzar the dream, and thus God gave Daniel the revelation. Now, another interesting thing about this that I want to kind of cover here is, notice verse 47. Then the king said to Daniel, your God is indeed God of God and Lord of lords, right? Now, let's just stop for a moment. That seems like he's humbled. Seems like he's seen the light. Hold on, because we're not going to get into chapter 3, obviously, at this point. I'll get into it in the next study, but I wanted to kind of get ready to show you this here. What you see is he's impressed. I think without a doubt he's impressed. And this kind of shows us how people can have an external belief and express an external belief, but not from the heart. That's what in other words, when he says here, your God indeed is the God of God and the Lord of lords, right? Daniel, your God he's the man upstairs. He's expressing something, but he doesn't really believe it. Not yet. God's going to do some things with Nebuchadnezzar that in and of itself is astounding. But at this point, this is just lip language. When Jesus told the Pharisees, you guys, you draw near to God with your lip, but your heart is far from him. This is what we're seeing with Nebuchadnezzar. He's impressed. You can say he can't help but be impressed. All right. I mean, after all, like, yeah, he told what I was thinking. And I oftentimes think about this too, that these so-called prophets today, you ever notice they do these cold reads? They're very vague. They're never specific. Some even after the fact. You ever notice that, like, take a tragedy. I don't want to mention anyone because, I just don't, they don't sense in trying to bring it up, uh, bringing up pain. But you ever notice, like, with tragedies, right, that people don't, these prophets, these so-called prophets, they never ever prophesy, hey, this is coming. For example, where were the prophets that said that that Russia was going to, invade Ukraine? Where's the word that tells us the outcome? Now, you have them, they will tell you after the fact, yeah, God showed me in the visions, back 2 years ago, but where are the words at? Where are the prophecies at? When you think about mass, again, just mass destruction, whatever. And the reason why they can't, because they're false prophets, and secondly, they can't without God. Now, oftentimes, I said this too. Let me do this. I am going to go quickly to Numbers chapter 12 and end with this. A true prophet. If you are a prophet, a true prophet of God, this is what's going to happen. This is Numbers chapter 12. And then this is a story when Moses was confronted by Miriam and Aaron, basically saying, you're not the only one God speaks to. And then God replied, and here he says, verse 6, he said, listen to what I say. If there is a prophet among you from the Lord, I make myself known to him in vision. I speak to him in a dream. I'm going to stop there because it goes on and it's going to go into the rebuke. But notice God said, if there's a prophet among you, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to reveal myself to him. So if you're really, truly speaking, now Daniel right? This is what happened to Daniel, and then Daniel was established to be a true prophet of the Lord. When Daniel spoke, people knew that the Lord was using him, that the Lord was speaking through him. We're going to pick it up in chapter 3 because I went through this to get into chapter 3 because, as I said, Nebuchadnezzar, he gave some lip service, but he truly, truly didn't believe it. And we're going to see in chapter 3. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to VP the Bible Perspective. Excuse me. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome, and I'll see you in the next study.